I love when being lazy pays off, when you've got a secret to a recipe that makes it easier to make, but also tastes a lot better than the original. Not only is my secret for lazy eggplant parmesan easier to make, but it tastes better because you can actually taste the eggplant and it's a lot lighter than the traditional version. Welcome to Actually Italian. I'm Sal and I've been living in Italy for years. I want to really help you cook authentic recipes in the way that an actual Italian would make them. Eggplant Parmigiana is a classic in Italy and they eat it everywhere, from the Alps all the way down to Sicily. Everybody has their own recipe for it, so there's a million different versions, but most of them are time consuming and frankly some of them come out a little bit greasy. So this version is going to save you time and it's actually going to be much lighter. Since the sauce is going to take the longest to cook, I want to get started with that now. In a cold saucepan, I'm going to put this over medium-low heat with some oil and garlic. And the reason we want it cold to start is so that way the oil can get infused with the flavor of the garlic without the garlic getting burned. It's only going to take a few seconds. Once we see the garlic is starting to sizzle, we don't want to go any further, so that's when we add the sauce. We're going to add some tomato passata, whatever kind you like, and then rinse the jar with some water. Put that in. A little bit of basil, and give it a good stir. We're not going to add any salt yet at this point because it is going to get dense and thicken up, and it might get too salty. We'll salt it at the end. So for now, I'm going to turn this down to low and let it simmer for about 20-25 minutes with the cover on. All right, let's dive in and let's talk about some eggplant. Obviously the key to this dish is going to be good eggplant. So how do you know when an eggplant is good? There's a lot of different kinds of eggplant. You can use whatever kind you like. I've got Sicilian eggplant here. What you want to look for, whether it's Sicilian, whether it's like your traditional kind of black, long eggplant, is that the skin is nice and smooth. It should be smooth, it should be shiny, it shouldn't be wrinkly, it shouldn't be tough, it should feel good in the hand. The other thing is the weight. This thing is heavy. It's a lot heavier than you think it would be based on the size. So it should be really dense. It should be dense, heavy. When you squish it, it should be firm. Anyway, that's how you look for a good eggplant. Let's get into preparation. This is the secret here. It's really easy. Well, actually, first tip is to use a serrated knife. I'm going to get rid of this top because that's not going to be very good. I'm going to cut these into probably like a little less than 1/4 inch slices. And then, this is the secret. I'm going to put them in this pan with parchment paper with a little oil, and then I'm just going to brush a little bit of oil on top of them, and I'm going to bake them. These aren't going to be fried. That's the secret. So I'm going to cook them through in the oven instead of making cutlets. I'm still going to use some breadcrumbs though at the end, and you'll see how I do it. Eggplant is like a sponge. It's going to absorb, if you fry it, if you make a cutlet out of these and fry them, they're going to absorb a lot of the oil. Then when you're baking them, all that oil is going to come out into the Parmesan. That's why it feels greasy. So by baking these first, they're not going to absorb that oil. There's hardly any oil in here at all. Another key with eggplant is, this is another reason why you want it fresh, because you hardly see any seeds in here. If there's a lot of seeds, the texture is going to be off, and it's also what makes eggplant bitter. So a nice fresh eggplant is not going to have a lot of seeds, and it's actually going to be sweeter. The key with eggplant to remember is that it's almost like tofu. It doesn't have a ton of flavor on its own, and what it does is it absorbs whatever flavors of the things that you're cooking it with. So in this case, it's going to be a nice rich tomato sauce. So we don't want it to have all that oil in it because then it won't be able to absorb that sauce. Okay, to get these in the pan, well, I'm going to cut these in half here, so that way it all kind of fits in. All right, I'm going to finish brushing these with oil, and then I'm going to put them in a preheated oven at 350 degrees. These are going to cook for about 20 minutes. We're ready for assembly, so let's go over what we've got here. Our sauce is just a basic tomato sauce with basil and garlic. It cooked for about 25 minutes. just to get the raw tomato taste gone, because it is going to continue to cook. So 25 minutes was definitely enough time. We've got our eggplant here. This took a little bit longer than the 15-20 minutes because even though I said to cut it about 1/4 inch, I ended up cutting them about 1/2 inch, so it took a little bit longer. But they're cooked through. This is very important. They should be cooked all the way through, because if we put them in where they're still kind of raw, all the water is going to come out of it, and you're going to end up with a very watery Parmesan. Then, let's go over here. We've got our breadcrumbs. So since I didn't fry them, we'd be missing these breadcrumbs. So I still want to use these because these are going to give it kind of a denser and more compact kind of texture that we'd be missing if I didn't add some. So we're going to use these breadcrumbs. Then I've just got some salt because I didn't salt the eggplant, because when I was cooking it, if I had salted it, they were just going to become mushy. I want them to have their texture here, so I'm going to add salt as we layer. Fresh mozzarella. I wouldn't use the low moisture. I would make sure you use the fresh mozzarella that's in that kind of juice in the whey, because you're going to get a nice creamy richness. Then just some Parmesan cheese, grated Parmesan. Let's put this all together. To keep it from sticking to the bottom, I'm going to put just a little bit of sauce in the bottom first. Then I'm going to layer my eggplant here. You can overlap too. We want to make sure that we have a real consistent layer and we don't have any gaps. You want every bite, every kind of, as we cut this, we want every slice to be pretty consistent. So let's take another little one to get in the middle there. Layer number one, done. Sprinkle a little bit of salt. Breadcrumbs, because these would have been cutlets, right? So now we've got the breadcrumbs on top. That's going to give it that same kind of effect as if we had made some fried cutlets. Now I'm going to add a little sauce over the top. We don't need a ton, but we definitely need enough, because remember, the eggplant is going to absorb some of that sauce. Then the the mozzarella, I'm just going to rip apart and just create a layer like that. So that's enough for that layer. Then I'm just going to go in with a little bit of the Parmesan. And then we're going to repeat. So I'm going to add another layer of eggplant. We're just going to keep going like that. For the last layer, I'm not going to put the breadcrumbs on this part yet. I'm going to actually put it on the top, because we're going to get a nice crust with the breadcrumbs and the cheese on top. So I want this completely covered with sauce. Any of these bits that would be sticking through are going to burn. So we want it all covered. Now, the breadcrumbs. So basically we're going to form like a little gratin on the top here, so it's going to be kind of crispy, give it a really nice texture. And Parmesan. Not too much, because otherwise it'll make like a crust that's a little hard to get through. That's it, it's ready for the oven. So we're going back into a 350-degree oven, and this will take about a half an hour. We took about an hour to do this, between the prep, between the baking it off first, between the sauce, and then assembly and finishing it in the pan in the oven. At a minimum, we saved about 20 minutes there by not frying. And it's not greasy, and it holds its shape. It's nice and compact. You know, it's not like oozing out all over the plate, but it still has plenty of sauce. I'm going to take a bite. We're going to see if it's as good as a traditional one. This is really, really good. We've got that richness of the sauce, and it just melds perfectly with the eggplant, plus the mozzarella is nice and creamy. Even the top here, you can kind of see it almost replicates that texture that you would get if we had fried these with breadcrumbs. Really, there's not only is there no need to do that step, it's just better this way. It's just much, much better. I can taste the sauce. It's not greasy. It's just a pleasure to eat. There you have it. It's the Lazy Man's Eggplant Parmesan. I hope you give it a try like this. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, we'll see you later.